Spirit. This is Taste the Spirit, benefiting Camp One Step and Children's Oncology Services. And thanks for being here. This is going to be a fun night. We're going to learn a lot about whiskey. We're going to enjoy a lot of wonderful whiskeys. And I want to thank everybody who has helped out in organizing this. Special thanks to our poker community. If you are here because you have been part of our Midwest Poker Championship for so many years, thanks for continuing to being a part of what we're doing here. And it's just going to be a terrific night for the best of causes. And if you're new to what we do, Taste the Spirit is going to benefit Camp One Step. And our mission statement at Camp One Step is that we empower kids who have cancer, encouraging them to take on the world. And I've been part of the organization for many years. You may know that I'm the co-host of the Bernstein and Rahimi Show, which is 9 a.m. to noon on Sports Radio 670 The Score. But I've also been a board member and vice chairman of the board of this wonderful organization that has helped so many kids for so many years now through our various programs. And we provide these programs for free. And it's important to us to make sure that we don't turn away any young person with cancer who needs any of the programs that we provide, free programs serving kids with cancer and their families. And it's just to bring them happiness and joy and connection and support. A lot of charities have had some difficult times during the pandemic, and our wonderful staff and dedicated volunteers, our camper families, did such a great job pivoting to our virtual camp. It was so good that even when we get back into the woods soon, we're keeping virtual camp because it was such a smashing success because of everybody involved. So thank you for being a part of this evening. It's something very, very important to me. And I think it's going to be a very special night, and I look forward to raising as much money as we can to send as many kids as we can to camp. We have auction items for you to check out. The Great Escape has donated some terrific items to get you ready for summer. So to be part of the bidding or any of the donations, it's very important that you text Taste the Spirit as one word, Taste the Spirit, to 76278. We've got a raffle going for $10. You can enter the raffle to win 6 bottles of whiskey. And I'll be keeping you updated on our fundraising as we go on. But I'm really looking forward to this wonderful night. We will be tasting 2 whiskeys from each of 3 distilleries who have been so generous in helping us do this. First up is going to be Few, then Sagamore, and lastly, Highland Park. And at the end, we'll answer some questions that you can put into the chat, and we'll look through there and we'll make sure that you know everything you want to know about these whiskeys. I'd like to introduce now the representatives of the distilleries for tonight. First is Paul Kletko. He is the founder and distiller at Few Spirits, and he makes whiskey that's been called the best in the world, and he makes it here in Chicagoland. Brett Bauer is representing Sagamore Spirits. Brett is a Chicagoland-based industry vet with over 20 years of experience selling everything from beer to high-end single malts. He also happens to be passionate about his baseball. Sri Rao from Edrington Americas is going to be quarterbacking a lot of what we do and helping me sort of pass the ball around tonight. And Sri and Edrington have been instrumental in making sure this event is going to be the best it can possibly be. Representing Highland Park Distillery is Jeremy Fonicello. Jeremy is currently located in New York. He is Edrington America's leading expert of single malt whiskey, and he's going to be guiding us through the tasting and answering your questions. We also have some very special celebrity tasters here. You know Danny Parkins as the afternoon co-host of Parkins and Spiegel on Sports Radio 670. He is going to be joined by his executive producer, Shane Reardon. And I do this with great trepidation. Hello, Shane. Hello, Danny. And they will be commenting and tasting and providing their thoughts. And also, I don't know why I did this, but I did. Shane Reardon has been handed the Twitter feed at Camp One Step. He is going to be tweeting this event as the official tweeter for at Camp One Step. So to get us started, to get us set up and get us ready to taste some wonderful whiskeys, I hand it back to Sri Rao.
Thanks, Dan, and thank you, everybody, for coming out and joining us tonight. We are super excited to have you out here with us. Just wanted to make sure everybody has their tasting mats out. Take a second to get your cups set up and get your whiskeys poured. As a reminder, please remember to make sure you first off split the whiskey between the two folks you're tasting with. But second off, you always, when you're tasting, want to leave a little bit there so you can go back to it as you're comparing the different whiskeys as we move along. As another reminder, please remember when you are nosing your whiskey that you keep your mouth open. That will help protect your nose and allow you to taste a little bit more about what you're smelling. And once again, please remember, we're going to be drinking 6 different whiskeys tonight, and we want to make sure that we are enjoying responsibly. Thank you very much. I'm going to hand it off to my friend Paul here, and Paul is going to take it away and tell us a little bit about Few and our 2 whiskeys from him.
Oh, thanks, Sri, and thanks, Dan. Thanks, everybody, for being here. This is a really important cause. And I really hope that everybody out there is ready, willing, and able to dig deep, whether it's $1, $5, $500. The money matters. And we're here for fun, but we're also here to kind of make sure we're taking care of our community. And so as best you can, please give to the kids. But just like Sri said, my name's Paul. I'm the founder, distiller, janitor, bottle washer, you name it here at Few Spirits. We're a grain to glass craft distillery right here in Evanston, and I'm actually sitting right here in the distillery, so you can see our stills, or one of our stills right behind us. If I move my head a little bit, you can see another still. And we're really excited that tonight we're going to be drinking 2 of our whiskeys, 2 of our related whiskeys as well. So we're drinking our Few Spirits straight bourbon, as well as our Few Spirits cold cut bourbon. And so we'll kind of get to those in just a second. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the nature of being a distillery here in Chicagoland. In particular, we're in Evanston, which is interesting primarily because Evanston is the birthplace of the entire Prohibition movement. Evanston was actually founded specifically to outlaw alcohol. And as a result, it ended up being the birthplace of the entire Prohibition movement with the Women's Christian Temperance Union and its most famous leader, Frances Elizabeth Willard, with a lot of people noticing a similarity with her initials in our name, although that is, of course, a complete and total coincidence. The first spirit we'll be drinking tonight will be the Few Spirits straight bourbon. Full, rich, full-flavored bourbon. And what we think it really kind of makes it stand out is going to be some cinnamon spice flavor. One of the challenges of being in the bourbon business is that the boys and girls down in Kentucky make some fantastic quality whiskey. And so for us to be able to be out in the marketplace, we have to be able to meet their quality, but also make sure that our stuff tastes a little bit different. And so we're really excited that we get to bring the Few Spirits bourbon out there. It doesn't taste like Kentucky bourbon, primarily because it's not Kentucky bourbon. And so it's something we're really proud of. And it is the number 2 selling grain to glass craft bourbon in the United States. So I think there's an awful lot of people out there that agree with us that it's pretty good. So without further ado, I believe Shane and Parkins are going to be digging in, as will I.
So I heard this right? We're doing the Few straight bourbon first?
Yeah, the Few bourbon. You can't see I don't think you get the full bottle there.
Oh, yeah. I love that one.
Yeah, this is our number 1 seller.
Am I supposed to sniff it with, because I've done wine tastings before, right? And I know you go in with one nostril and then the other nostril, because sometimes your nostrils smell things different ways. Am I supposed to go straight up with both nostrils or individual nostrils?
A lot of it's going to be personal preference, but I always suggest is that you start your inhale with the glass a pretty good distance away, and then continue inhaling until you find where you're getting the nose. So if you just bury your nose in there, you can really get a lot of alcohol burn. This is 46.5% ABV. So if you just bury your nose in there right off the bat, it might not give you the full enjoyment that you're looking for. And also, just like Sri said, always try to leave your mouth open at least just a little bit. You'll get a lot more sensation and a lot more pleasure that way instead of just blowing out your nose.
All right, Paul, so I prefer right nostril, so I'll sniff it with my right nostril.
There you go.
You've just set a record for the word nostril in a minute. Never heard
but it's a good record.
Yeah.
I was brought here to do one thing, set records.
Yeah.
Impressive. It's
Ooh.
delicious.
Records and kick ass, and you're out of records.
That's
So
right.
what are the characteristics when you say it doesn't taste like a Kentucky bourbon? Is that like terroir? Are we just talking about because it's not the same water, it's not the same soil?
It's different water. We use different grains, but we also use different production techniques. But I think the real big difference is that kind of cinnamon spice.
You can really taste the cinnamon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's more like the cassia cinnamon, like you might use in a curry, rather than like a big red chewing gum cinnamon.
Right.
Pardon. What do you guys think? Enjoying?
It's lovely.
I think it's delicious.
Is there any citrus that I'm supposed to be getting from it?
Yeah, I mean, you say citrus. I'm getting some nice citrus. I don't usually get that much, but I am getting a little bit of
Maybe orange peel?
a little bit of orange peel, a little bit of it's not the orange. Like I'm getting I think it's pomelo, where it's like a little bit like a nectarine sort of.
Hey Dan, tell us all about the history of pomelo.
You can't do that when I'm taking a sip.
You just did.
Yeah.
It's all about
I'm
time,
on
baby.
Twitter right now. He's the Twitter man, so make sure it's good.
I think Shane should have to finish each one since he's running the Twitter account.
It will make for an entertaining Twitter feed.
This is a
I only took
generous
half of that
tasting
one.
kit, by the way.
So the bourbon, 70% corn, 20% rye, 10% malted barley. We use a Belgian beer yeast to ferment it, and so that's where you get some of that spice from. Our barrels come out of Minnesota, number 3 char wood. So a lot of the people out there are probably a little interested in some of those recipe details. And end of the day, it's a delicious whiskey.
I've had that one often, but for some reason, maybe it's because you're telling us, Paul, how to taste it. I'm getting different flavors and different nodes than I have previously. Would that be accurate? Is that something that would happen?
Certainly. I think set and setting can always be a big difference too. The set and setting of sitting in front of your laptop in front of doing a tasting is going to be a very different setting than when you're sitting around a campfire with your friends, or you're at the bar. If you remember back in the days when we could all go to bars. I remember going to bars. And I think it meant, that set and setting can make a big difference in how you experience it, as well as other food you've had that day. Like if you had a really spicy dinner, or if you had a salad instead of buffalo wings, all these things can make a difference in how you experience the whiskeys.
I enjoyed that very much.
There were pretzels included in the. Is that like ginger with sushi, like to kind of reset your palate, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I personally prefer. Pretzels are really popular. I personally prefer saltines, as well as getting a really big whiff of fresh coffee beans.
Oh, really?
Yeah, for me, the coffee beans is a great palate reset. But different people are different. Pretzels are probably the more popular one. So a few spirits. Again, we're right here in Evanston. And going good. The other whiskey we'll be tasting is our Few Spirits Cold Cut. And this is a really interesting one because it kind of goes along with Few's kind of reputation for being a little bit innovative or pushing boundaries a little. And those of you who drink bourbon on the regular probably recognize that bourbon comes out of a barrel. But when whiskey comes out of the barrel, it comes out at a much higher ABV than we bottle it at. And so generally speaking, say, for example, with our Few Spirit Straight Bourbon and virtually every other bourbon out there, you add water to bring the ABV of that bourbon down to the bottling strength. With the Cold Cut Bourbon, instead of using water, we use cold brew coffee. And so you might get some really nice but mild, gentle coffee notes. And so as you're sitting and sipping that, it is going to lead with whiskey up front. It is still 46.5% ABV. In honor, 46.5% ABV is, of course, 93 proof. in honor of the 1893 World's Fair here in Chicago.
Paul, can you talk about how you should sit the whiskey in your mouth as you're tasting it? Should it be like wine and coffee where you should kind of let it hit the back sides, like underneath your ear? Should you let it go all the way down there, or is it a swish thing?
Well, I'd typically recommend, at least at first, taking the smallest amount of whiskey in your mouth as you can. Again, if you bring in too much, it might have a little extra burn at that high ABV. You can always take a bigger sip the next time. But if you take a big sip and you try to swirl it around, it can blow out your palate. So again, the first one, bring the alcohol in, let your tongue and your mouth kind of get used to the high ABV. Enjoy the flavors, enjoy the sensations, and then you can bring a little bit bigger, and you can swirl it around on your second and third sip once your palate has kind of gotten accustomed to 46.5% alcohol.
I'll tell you what, Paul, this is a much bigger upgrade than the rubbing alcohol I usually drink on Thursday nights.
Well, there you go. So a few cold cut won world's best flavored whiskey last spring. It was one of the last things I did prior to lockdown was I went to New York and went to the award ceremony and had a really good time. But we use a local coffee here. It's a company called Passion House. They've got 3 or 4 coffee shops around Chicagoland. It's all roasted here, and the owner's a friend of mine. We're seeing a few comments pop up that people are really liking it, and
this is wonderful. I really noticed. I get like whatever receptors I have for coffee ice cream, like specific coffee ice cream it's setting those off.
How common is it? Like, how specific to you guys is the coffee hint or mix with the bourbon?
I believe we're the only ones.
Really? Okay.
There are others out there that do kind of sugared flavored whiskeys. Like Jameson has a 60, I believe it's 60 proof cold brew with Jameson, and there's some coffee liqueurs out there.
Right.
But I don't know of anybody else doing it this way with no sugar added, no artificial flavors, nothing added that you wouldn't serve your mother, as long as you like your mother. It's just whiskey and coffee. And to my knowledge, we're the only ones doing it. And it's that cold brew. So I think just like Dan was saying, you get that kind of sweeter coffee note, like the coffee ice cream. It's not bitter like your hot cup of coffee in the morning. No acid, not as much citrus, but it really brings that kind of chocolatey, nutty sweetness out of the coffee bean. And we're really excited about this, and I think people are really starting to latch onto it. But I know I don't want to keep all the time going. Thanks everybody for the attention. Thanks for listening. Thanks for trying. And again, please dig deep. Let's support Camp One Step. This is important. We're all here for a reason. Yeah, we're having a good time, but don't forget the kids. Someone's got to think of the children someday.
Paul Kletko of Few Spirits, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. Remember to put your questions in the chat that we can answer later. We have a matching donation that has been generously supplied leading up to this and through this tonight from Edrington Americas. And usually when we do these things, the match is a 1-to-1 match. Well, this is very special. This is a 2-to-1 match, which is going to essentially triple your donation. And what happens, Edrington Americas is going to do this up to the first $5,000 raised. If you donate 50, Edrington will donate 100. That's a $150 total donation to Camp One Step. And I want to thank Sri Rao for him spearheading this on behalf of Edrington Americas. Edrington represents the brands Highland Park, Macallan, Glenrothes, and Tequila Partida. Now, if you haven't yet, make sure that you have texted Taste the Spirit to 76278 that will allow you to donate via text. Once you do that, you text the word give and then your donation amount to 76278. To donate $100, text give 100 to 76278, and that will do that. And just so you know how far your money goes, a total of $500 will sponsor a child's virtual participation, and $1,000 sends a kid to in-person camp. And I want to let you in a little bit before we do our next round of whiskey tasting. I think it's best that you hear from our Camp One about the impact that this experience can have on the lives of so many kids and families. So I want you to enjoy this message from a camper parent of ours. Meet Sarah.
And we are proud to be members of the Camp One Step family. Sophia is our third child. She was an easy baby and brought so much joy to our family. In our over 10 years of parenting, we had only been to the ER once for stitches. We were out of our depths when the ER doc said she needed a CT scan. At 10:30 at night, he came back into the room with another doctor to tell us that Sophia had a mass in the center of her brain and that she would need immediate brain surgery to relieve the pressure that was building because this mass was blocking the flow of fluid in her head. It had reached critical status and had to be done immediately. Just like that, our entire existence changed. But you know how we felt. You experienced it last March. All of a sudden, life as we knew it was over. We needed to stay home and protect ourselves from germs, wear masks. We couldn't make plans because a fever could land her back in the hospital. We were constantly pivoting and adjusting to our new life as a cancer family. Our pediatrician surprised.
Shit.
Seems like we're having a technical issue with our parent video, but we thank Sarah very much for her efforts in recording this and telling her story and telling her very, very heartfelt story about what camp can do for a family whose life is turned upside down, everyone involved, and to have camp there as that connection and as that community for many who have told similar stories is it's irreplaceable.
To come out of surgery. He walked us through what they were doing, tried to reassure us that we were in the very best spot for treatment. But the most important thing he gave us was hope. He looked deep into our eyes and he said, "There's good that's going to come out of this. You are going to learn how much people love you, and it's more than you could ever imagine." The best way to describe pediatric cancer is like a roller coaster. As parents, you work to educate yourself about all the options and pitfalls. You try to protect your heart against the cruel reality that 50% of these kids won't make it. And you pray constantly that the coin flip is going to go your way. Sophia was in active treatment for 3 years. She relapsed twice during that time, necessitating 3 different chemo regimens. She had a permanent shunt placed to help with the flow of fluid in her brain. She went into puberty at age 3 and needed an implant to stop it. She lost vision in her right eye. Every port access was horrific. How do you explain to a toddler that a huge needle plunged into their chest is going to make everything better? She experienced so much trauma, but had no words to express her painful emotions. Our once joyful little lady began to have explosive fits. Her pain was real, both emotional and physical, and all we could do was push forward to save her life. We had heard about Camp One Step through Lurie, but honestly didn't consider it as she was so young, she couldn't do sleepaway camp, and our sole focus was keeping her alive. But then in the spring of 2016, one of her dear hospital friends mentioned that he was going to Camp One Step day camp for the younger kids, just like them. He invited her to join him. She was excited, but so nervous. Any separation from me at that time caused a complete meltdown. I was nervous too, but I decided she should try. We negotiated before going. Just one day to try it out. When we walked in that first
I apologize for the technical difficulties, and everybody who has been doing business for the last year via Zoom and other ways understands certainly that these things can be imperfect. But again, we do thank Sarah for sharing her story about what camp has meant. When she describes what that family has gone through, I want you to know that from my experience, it sounds like what she's saying is so unique. It's not. It's very common. That's the story, and that's not just her family, but that's all of our families, one way or another, who have recognized exactly what camp means, as scared as they are, as scared as these kids are. When you see them get to camp and see the lake and understand that they can just be kids, and they don't have to be the kid with cancer, because everybody there is that. And you watch them take off prosthetics. You watch them get out of wheelchairs, and you watch them build fires and go fishing and go to the climbing wall and everything that they can do. It's remarkable. And I give Sarah a lot of credit for being able to keep herself as composed as she does when talking about it, because once you've seen it, you understand it in a way that is that you feel very, very deeply, and that's why we're here. It's why we're here. It's why we're tasting these wonderful whiskeys. So as of the moment, we are approaching $3,000 toward the $5,000 goal. So we've got I think we're at like 2,100 left to reach the match. So keep going, keep doing what you're doing, and keep heading to. However you've been doing it, we're texting Taste the Spirit to 76278. Text GIVE and then the donation amount. GIVE and then the number. There we go. I see numbers coming in right now to 76278. And we are hopeful of making that match tonight. But let's taste more whiskey, shall we? Next up is going to be Brett Bauer and Sagamore Spirits for some double oak and some signature rye. Brett.
Hey, thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. And thank you to everybody for having me. And I echo Paul's words. Give deep, whether that's $1 or 500. And I think people are listening because I keep getting outbid for things that are in the auction as I was watching Paul in the video there. But I'm Brett Bauer. I'm with Sagamore Spirit. Live out in Oswego, Illinois, but cover about 14 states for us and have been in the industry quite some time. So, as Dan mentioned earlier, selling everything from beer onto high-end scotch. But I've been with Sagamore pretty much since the beginning. As Paul said, our friends in Kentucky make really good bourbon and whiskey. But before Kentucky had bourbon, Maryland had rye. Maryland was once third in production of whiskey behind Pennsylvania and New York. The style dates back to the mid-1700s, where you had people basically escaping the government in European countries, coming over here and then learning to make rye and being left alone. Ultimately, then moving towards Kentucky, where back then that was the West. But Maryland in 1910 had 44 registered distilleries. 21 were in Baltimore city limits alone. The style was known for being very approachable, very high quality, lighter, a little bit sweeter than some of the spicier ryes that were out at the time. Come World War II, very much like this last year, as a lot of distilleries converted to hand sanitizer. For World War II, a fair majority of them converted to ethanol production. In fact, over half the ethanol used by the Navy in World War II came from distilleries. And then after the war, people came back, styles had changed. Kentucky was kind of up and booming and doing their thing. And people were drinking different things, and Maryland rye went away. Pikesville, a brand that's still available today, closed its doors in 1982, I believe. Later, Kentucky buys the brand and makes a Maryland style rye out of Kentucky, based on how popular the style was. You'll see some others. Leopold in Denver makes a Maryland style rye, and there's a few more that have popped up more recently. But our mission and our goal is to build a global passion for Maryland style rye and to put the style back on the map. So for Sagamore, we have two tastings today. Everything we do is a blend of two mash bills. Our first is a very traditional 95 rye, 5 barley mash bill. A lot of ryes have this. You'll see this very, very often. But then very unique to us is what I call our barely legal rye. It's 52% rye, 43% corn, 5% malted barley. We distill and age those separately, and then blend to a taste profile per whatever the brand and the item that we're making. And then everything sees a splash of from this limestone aquifer spring house, which sits on Sagamore Farm, which is in Reisterstown, Maryland, about 20 minutes north of the distillery. Sagamore Farm goes way, way back. But A Native Dancer was a very famous racehorse. I think in the 2012 Derby, everybody went to his bloodline. He won every race but the Derby. They say he was bumped all over the track. He saw it all but the women's bathroom that day. But very famous thoroughbred racing horse. But our water comes from that spring house that was built in 1909. You walk in there, it looks like a flooded basement. There is no floor. It's just a limestone aquifer. So the water comes right up. The calcium and the limestone removes impurities and acts like a great filter. So for our first one, if everybody wants to go ahead and pull out their signature Sagamore 83 proof, we call it our signature rye. And again, as Paul said, and I'm sure earlier, try to make sure you have enough for 2 sips. This is going to be a lighter, sweeter rye. Again, that Maryland style, being at 83 proof. If you're an experienced whiskey drinker, this might be your breakfast whiskey. But if you're new into whiskey or you want to have a few,
He didn't laugh at that, by the way.
No, well, that's because it's true. This is the first whiskey I drank before my morning meeting with Mitch.
You need more.
So if you're new to whiskey or new to rye, maybe you've had a rye before that was really big and spicy and kind of scared you off. This is rye for a bourbon drinker or somebody coming into it. Or, sometimes you want to have 5 or 6 in a night, but be able to function tomorrow. This is a perfect place for it at that 83 proof. Some candied orange peel, nutmeg, some of that caramel and the vanilla and traditional baking spices, short finish, really easy drinking.
Really easy.
Very good.
It's delicious.
Brett, I got a question for you. Are there any, do whiskeys and ryes ever use herbs like rosemary or thyme or anything like that?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Well, That's a dead end. My bad, man.
Well, I was going to ask this about mouth feel. This feels, I don't know if thicker is the term or if there's a viscosity difference, but there is. This does seem it's different than what we've tasted so far. I mean, there's a certain substance to the mouth feel of the actual liquid.
Yeah, and you'll see those vary between proof types, age statements, and one of the things that makes the category so fun is how much great stuff there is out there, and then the different nuances in there. So, with this at 83 proof, it's got a nice viscosity to it, but definitely a lot shorter than you'll see when we move over here now to the double oak that we'll taste next, which is going to be a bit spicier. And probably a longer finish, a much longer finish. Our double oak started, this is our, you guys I think have the 4th batch, was a mistake, to be honest. Somebody messed up the blend of the mash bills, and rather than reverse engineering, we were meeting with Independent Stave, and they had these wave stave barrels as kind of an R&D project. So we were like, hey, we'll take those. And I don't have an example with me, but if you think of a traditional 53-gallon American oak barrel, which is what we age everything in, and then maybe one of those Zen gardens on your desk, just small grooves, inside on every stave. They add about 36% more surface area. And now the whiskey, after we take the high and the low, 4 to 5 years, blend them together. Now this was 18 months in those wave stave barrels. So you add Maryland, our rick houses are not temperature controlled. So as Maryland gets very humid in the summer, it gets pretty cold in the winter. You get a lot of that ebb and flow. And again, about 38% more surface area. So you're going to pull out a lot more of those oak notes, a lot more from the wood than you would in just traditional staves. So the baking spices are going to be a little bit more prevalent here. You jump up to 96.6 proof. Probably the most rye spice from the oak there out of our portfolio, but still very, very approachable. A nice mouthfeel, long finish, but I don't think too long. A lot of caramel in this one. I always hear a lot of people talk about campfires and s'mores with this one. You get a lot of those notes from it.
Should I have moved on to the double oak rye? Is that what you're talking about right now?
Yeah.
Or still on the? Yeah. Okay. All right. My bad. I'm catching up. Hold on.
It's delicious. You'll like it. How much of discovery when you're doing this? You said you've done all those different things. It is just trial and error. We we made an accident and then we lucked into it, and now we have this whole new flavor profile?
A lot. We do limited releases. We have an idea to do them about twice a year, but there's some things that, you know, you put them in the barrel and you take it out and it's just not there, and you punt it. And sometimes you do some things and it works out really, really well. And the good thing is, you know, we're not selling tomatoes. So with whiskey, you know, if you don't like where it is, just throw it back in the barrel and come check on it in another year or 6 months and see if it's changed. But, you know, there's some things that I've seen at the distillery that will not see the light of day, I'm sure. And then there's some things that I think we didn't think were going to be very good, and it turned out to be really good. We had a Calvados finish that just did not turn out. We did not like where it was, and our ops team wouldn't let us release it, which as a sales guy is frustrating because I got a quota hit. But we put it back into rye barrels for another year, and then it came out and turned out to be this phenomenal whiskey that we released a couple of years ago. So there's a lot of trial and error to it. Not necessarily on the core with our signature and our cask strength, but when you get to our LTOs and the limited items, it's a lot. And we have a good idea, but you never know. It's dynamic, and all rye is going to react with different things and different flora and fauna and different parts of the rick houses. You know, it changes daily.
Tasters, thoughts?
Danny, go ahead, Danny.
I mean, I think it's delicious, and you can, I mean, like you said, the caramel is, I mean, maybe of all of them that we've had, I would say like of a thing I could pick out, like a distinct flavor, I think I taste the caramel more than I, like, you know, obviously it's all, you know, the bourbon that we've had, obviously, but in terms of like, I've noticed cinnamon in the other one. I think the caramel in this is maybe the most distinct thing that I could pinpoint, even more so, frankly, but I'm not a coffee drinker, than the coffee in, I forgot which one, but the caramel is just
the cold cut.
Yeah, exactly. And it's delicious. I really like this one.
Great.
Now, Brett, stop me if this is sacrilegious to y'all who push bourbon. Can I put this in my next like homemade barbecue sauce? I feel like this would be phenomenal in a barbecue sauce.
Yeah, we sell some barbecue sauce with our rye out of the distillery, and yeah, it works well in that. I mean, there's no wrong way to get it out of the big bottle. It's sauce in a cocktail on the rocks, neat.
Well, so that was the rocks question was the other one. Like sometimes, you know, if I'm not feeling like putting some hair on my chest, I'm like, I'll just drop a rock or two in there. But then I feel like I shouldn't tell anybody about that. Like it's almost an embarrassment. There's no wrong way to drink whiskey. However you want it, if you want to put it with orange juice for some reason, go for it. You know, and to me, it depends what I'm doing, time and place. Like Paul said, you know, am I out for an evening? Am I just sitting in my backyard having a cigar? You know, and there's no wrong way to drink it. And then you'll see differences too. I mean, some people use those stones to chill, but avoid dilution. Right.
There's certain whiskeys that, you know, I've got some big whiskeys from some clubs that I need a little rock to open it up. And that first taste at 120 some odd proof is a lot and it's fun, but then my sweet spot's about 30 minutes in where I use the big spheres usually, but where that hits that right spot. And to me, that whiskey's really good at that point. But there's no wrong way to drink whiskey.
Someone in the chat just remarked, I think it was Nathan, who just remarked that this would be phenomenal in eggnog, which is a really good note. I think that's interesting. And the ice question, I was going to ask when we got to our next round with the scotches too, because there had been there's gourmet ice. There are some people who will get very, very specific ice cubes just for certain whiskeys, which is always a bit beyond me. But I'm glad you asked that, Danny, because I was going to ask that too.
Danny, can you believe we're here on a Thursday night and Bernstein is taking the fun out of ice cubes? Can you believe that?
Shocking.
Thank you. I really appreciate everything that you and Sagamore have done and appreciate it so much. And I want to remind you, the raffle tickets are available. Keep purchasing at tastethespirit.givesmart.com. And we are over $3,000 now, heading toward that match of $5,000. So text the word give and then your donation amount to 76278. We really want to get as close to or past that $5,000 as we can. And we have, your opportunities to give are endless. And even beyond this evening, if you want to find out more about Camp One Step and everything that we do and all of the ways to donate and be a part of our community, I urge you also to go to camponestep.org for that information. Also, thanks to our sponsors, of course, Bill's Heating and Air Conditioning, associated agencies, and as we mentioned, Edrington Americas, who's been so generous with this double match that they're giving. And now it is time for Scotch. So we are going to welcome in once again Jeremy Fonicello, who is going to tell us all about the Highland Park 12-year and about their full volume. And also, get your questions in the chat, because after Jeremy's done, we're going to get to all those questions. But Jeremy, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dan. This has been a real fun evening for an amazing cause. Highland Park is owned by Edrington, and Edrington is owned by the largest charitable trust in Scotland. It's called the Robertson Trust, and it was built by three sisters some time ago, and they decided to give their inheritance and their wealth to this incredible trust that is the largest charitable trust in Scotland, and really does do good around the world. So we're really happy to be here. So give, and we will double match every dollar raised tonight. Now to drinking. So, I think we're the only Scotch that here tonight, and we're the only smoky whiskey. So we've had some really great regional whiskeys here tonight, but I wanted to address, after listening to the other guys talk, why some whiskey is smoky or peaty and why some whiskey is not. It's a big misconception in Scotland that all whiskeys are peaty, and peaty and smoky mean exactly the same thing when you're referencing Scotch whiskey, and I'll tell you why. Well, let's pretend it's not Michigan. This is Scotland. And in Scotland, you have the Highlands, Lowlands, and then the Islands. And on the islands of Scotland, trees do not grow well. It has to do with the jet stream and the soil. So you don't cut down trees and burn them on the islands of Scotland. Even today, it's a big deal to cut down a tree. You would never burn it. You would build a house or a barn or a table. It's a precious commodity on the islands of Scotland. So traditionally, this is how you make whiskey. You start with barley. You artificially germinate that barley by adding water to it. It's like putting a flower in a vase. And then you have to stop it from overly ripening when it's at its sweetest, or it will rot and not taste very good. So the way that they would do that traditionally in Scotland, on the islands of Scotland, is they would take the barley, put it in a kiln, and underneath that kiln there is a fire source. The fire source on the islands of Scotland is peat. And peat is not that stuff you see on the top of a rock where I live in Connecticut, but it's actually that stuff way down, 20 feet down below, right before it turns to coal. It's peat, and it burns for a very long time. So traditionally, they would take this peat, they'd put it on the fire, and then they would smoke the barley. They would dry it and flavor it at the same time with the flavor of that peat smoke. Then once it's dry, they put it in a room, and it's called a malting floor, and big guys with shovels all day long hand turn the malt to ensure that it dries evenly. Then you turn that into a grist, you boil that 3 times, you get some sugar out of it, you add yeast to it, the yeast will convert the sugar to alcohol, then you have beer. All whiskey starts as a beer, and then you distill it. You boil it again, you capture the alcohol vapor once it separates from the water, and you get a run of whiskey. You take the center part, that's the best part, and you put it in an oak cask or barrel, and you age it for, in Scotland, at least 3 years, and you have Scotch whiskey. Now, traditionally, that's how you make Scotch whiskey, and that's why the whiskeys on the islands of Scotland are more or less always peaty or smoky to some degree, and then on the mainland of Scotland, they are much sweeter without peat and smoke. So in Orkney, which was founded in 1798, it's pretty much the same way that they make whiskey today. We use local peat moss from right down the street in a place called Hobbister Moor, which is a 9,000-year-old peat bog. We take the peat from below, and then we replace the topsoil to keep the beautiful, pristine landscape of the Orkney Islands for future generations to enjoy. We have enough peat to last us several lifetimes, so there's no worries there. But the peat is what gives us a little bit more of a unique flavor at Highland Park because we're using peat moss from right down the road. Something that was very interesting mentioned tonight from our two other whiskeys was they're using local ingredients, and to me, that is really what separates the men from the boys in the whiskey world. If you're using local water, oak even, I think we mentioned earlier in Few, the oak was from Minnesota, which is amazing. And it will give you different terroir. Terroir is a weird word to use in Scotch whiskey because normally there's so many different factors that come into play in the whiskey world that affect flavor that it's difficult to sort of pinpoint a terroir. But using local peat as opposed to industrially sourced peat will definitely give us a more unique flavor. And the peat at Highland Park is very floral. It's more flowers that grow and die over the course of thousands of years versus, say, trees or leaves or even seaweed, even though some of our whiskeys get a little briny, but not so much as, say, an Islay whiskey. So our first whiskey tonight from the Orkney Islands is Highland Park 12. Let's get that one ready. And Highland Park, though made in the Orkney Islands, this 12-year-old is aged predominantly in European and American sherry oak casks. And these are the most expensive casks in the Scotch whiskey world. Sherry oak is a term used. When we say sherry oak, that means it's an oak cask that previously held sherry wine from Spain. Even if the oak is from America, we'll ship it to Spain and then season the cask there in Spain and then ship it all the way up to Orkney and fill it with our whiskey. So sherry will give us more fruity notes, a little chocolate, cinnamon, nutmeg. The European oak tree will also give off a little bit more tannin. And the difference between Highland Park smoke versus, say, a smoky whiskey from Islay is that light floral note. It's not a huge peat bog type of whiskey. Plus, we're using these very expensive sherry oak casks, so we don't want to overpower the flavor of the oak with the flavor of the smoke. For us, it's about balance. And for all the wine nerds out there, you understand balance is what it's all about. We don't want something too far in one direction. We really want the flavors to come together and play equally. So go ahead if you haven't done so already. I really love Shane's technique of the right to the left, but I feel like I'm doing a whiskey neti pot when I do that. So I'm gonna keep mine just around here. And as we mentioned earlier, sticking your nose deep in the glass, probably you'll just smell fire and burning. So I like to keep it around here. I also just personally, and I've been doing this for a long time, I don't swirl my whiskey. I find swirling whiskey brings out the alcohol a little too intensely as well. You're dealing with stuff 43% and up. So keeping it nice and flat in the glass, you're going to get plenty of aromas. If you swirl it too much like a wine, then you're just going to smell fire. So give it a nose and taste if you haven't done so already. You can take a look at the color. Color's all 100% natural at Highland Park. We don't add artificial caramel coloring to the whiskeys ever. Almost everybody else does. So go ahead. Tell me what you think. Little chocolate, cinnamon, nutmeg, floral, peat, but not too overpowering.
I get that sherry right off the nose. And I don't know if it's an insult to say it smells like sherry wine, like if I'm cooking with sherry wine, because it doesn't taste like that. But I 100% get the sherry wine right off the nose. And then I get honey.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I think most people would associate sherry with cooking sherry because today we don't drink a lot of sherry for fun. We cook with it. In fact, that's pretty much the main reason why sherry as an industry still exists is because of cooking and whiskey. Because just drinking straight sherry has sort of fallen out of favor globally. It's still very popular in certain parts of Spain, but not enough to keep those old sherry bodegas in business. So it's really companies like Edrington and cooking sherry companies that keep those guys going.
Quick question to when you mentioned the Islay, the Islay.
Yep.
The scotches I've had from there, well, they're also islands. The peat is much more iodine-y, and there's
Yep.
almost a medicine-y.
Sure.
Why does the Orkney peat lack that iodine quality?
Well, it's a great question. And, nerds like me really love that, when they say like, oh, it's Band-Aid-y or iodine-y or hospital-y. Like for some reason, it's like, it sounds terrible, but it is what they kind of taste like. And when I'm in the mood for those whiskeys, it's great. Has to do with their location, the ocean. The peat they use is more seaweed forward. There's a lot of just old briny peat. The soil is just full of brine.
That was my pirate name, by the way, Old Briny Pete.
I frankly, that's catchier than Dan Bernstein. So I think I'm gonna use it.
Go with it.
I love it. So it's just different peat. If you're using local peat, it will affect the flavor, and it depends on the mood. Parkins, I see you have a question.
Well, I did, yeah. You mentioned a couple of times the color, and that
Yes.
you did, and it's natural, but that's rare or exclusive to you. Like, what
Not
is
exclusive, no, but rare.
not exclusive? But so I guess why? Like, it seemed like a point of pride for you for there to be no additives, but then
Sure.
why do maybe the majority of people try to change the color?
Well, so everything we do is 100% natural at Highland Park, and it's extremely difficult to maintain consistency naturally. So if you're most Scotch whiskey companies, most whiskeys around the world will add some caramel coloring to the whiskey to give it a more dark look, and the consumer believes dark is better, dark is older. And to be perfectly honest with you, dark never tells you anything about a whiskey. The color of our whiskey doesn't tell you anything about the flavor. We can give you very light whiskeys that are extremely bold, and we can give you very dark whiskeys that are very light naturally. But it's in the consumer's head that darker is better. And so a whiskey distiller, Paul mentioned that there's no additives in American whiskeys, which is great. In Scotch whiskeys, there are some in the blended categories that like to use a lot of caramel coloring, the same stuff you'd use in Coke or Pepsi. So let's move on to our next whiskey, which is Highland Park Full Volume. And Highland Park Full Volume is different than the Highland Park 12. Highland Park 12 aged only in those sherry oak casks, whereas the Highland Park Full Volume, which is an 17-year-old whiskey, is aged in ex-bourbon casks from America exclusively. So you'll really tell the difference. If the base spirit starts the same, and after aging for 12, 17 years, 18 years, it takes on a different flavor because it's aged in a different style of oak. And in this case, that American oak will give us much more vanilla, citrus, honey notes. Also, because of those lighter tones coming off of the American oak, it'll bring the peat a little bit more forward because the peat is not hiding behind the big fruity qualities of the sherry casks.
Also, I heard a story about this, Jeremy. I'm sorry to interrupt. I heard a story about why it's called Full Volume, why there is an American component here, and what this has to do with a well-known rock band from Manchester.
Can you tell me that story, Dan?
I had heard that there was one of the members of the band, James, famously from Manchester, was involved in this, and it had to do with Full Volume representing a Marshall amplifier. And
goes to 11.
These go to 11. Don't even point at it. Don't even look at it. Yeah. And I thought it was just a wonderful little connection to sort of bring us across the pond.
Yeah, and it's also 47.2%. So if you guys feel, we got into this question about ice and water and things like that it needs a little hint of water, don't be afraid to add it. I got to tell you, in the summertime, I drink my whiskey full of rocks, and I'm not ashamed of it. And there's nothing tastier than at the bottom of the glass chewing on those last couple of cubes that survived. So there's nothing wrong with drinking the whiskey the way you like it. With a higher proof whiskey, as was mentioned before, I actually do add just some water to it. I'll have a sip first, see if it needs, in my opinion, a little bit of water. The water will drop down the alcohol by volume, open up the aromas and flavors. I think a real Scotsman might tell you to only have 6 drops of water from the Spee River or something like that. I say just a little spoonful, a little teaspoon in a full shot is more than enough. And the real answer is, as mentioned before, drink it the way you like it. Don't tell me how to drink my whiskey. So that's us. Dan, I think we'll take some questions now on your end. As we say up in Orkney, we don't say Slàinte, which is what they say in Scotland. We say Skál, which is what we say up in Viking territory. So here's to all of us. Let's raise some money, and thank you again for having us.
Skál. Yeah. Skál. Yeah, apparently the celebrity member of Saul Davies is the guy from the band James that had to do with some of the story behind Full Volume and some of the creation of that. We are going to start answering questions, so feel free to put these in the chat, and Sri is going to curate some of these for us. But I want you to know, starting right now, for the next 5 minutes, any donation of $25 or more is going to be entered into a special raffle to win the remaining whiskey from the bottles that were used to fill all of the tasting bottles. So we have all of these sitting at our offices right now. So the winner of the raffle right now, if you put in $25, you're entered into the raffle. A $50 donation will be added twice. So you can get all of the extra from our kits tonight that we have sitting there. All of that is yours. You can get in the raffle right now. Any donation, $25 or more.
Nice.
And we look. This is above and beyond the raffles that we're already doing right now. And as I check our screen right now, we are at $3,435. So we are within shouting distance of our $5,000 match that will immediately become $15,000. So whatever you can do to help these kids, that your 50 becomes 150, your 100 becomes 300, your 500 becomes 1,500. This is a wonderful opportunity for you because of the generosity of Edrington Americas. So Sri, let us know what we have so we can answer a few questions here.
All right, Dan. Well, the first question is going to be for Paul, and it's a question about the cold cut. And let's see if I can get it to pop up here.
Sure.
Hey, Danny, mute yourself if you're going to chew pretzels, though. Like, come on, dude.
Sorry, they're just so delicious.
So Cody's asking, how did you come up with the idea of cutting the whiskey with cold brew coffee? The cold cut is actually I think it's our third release of ideas trying to merge whiskey and coffee together, primarily because I am a raging caffeine addict and trying to figure out cool ways to bring my two loves together. We had other stuff that was cool, but once we had this idea and we played around with it and we came up with this cold cut, we all just kind of like, whoa, that's outstanding. And we kind of went from there, and it's been really fun. It's been on the market now about 1.5 years, and people are really digging it. And once you've tasted it, you can figure out why.
Yeah, no, it's a great whiskey, and it was really cool. And you have a rye that has a little bit of a different twist there.
Yeah, so obviously we didn't taste it tonight, but we also have what we call the Few Immortal Rye, which is kind of the same idea, but we use a cold extracted oolong tea rather than coffee, and then we used our Few Spirit straight rye whiskey instead. Both fantastic stuff. Certainly slightly different, but people are really digging.
Cool. Our next question is going to be for Brett. And here we go. I think this was about your special releases. What's the best way to get to experience the limited release type of releases?
I'm assuming by experience it means drink them.
Or where to find them.
Yeah, any good good liquor store can get them. We're in Benny's. We're in a lot of the top neighborhood liquor stores. And it's if you follow us on social media, you'll see when the releases are coming. And then if you talk to your local person, they should be able to get it to you pretty close to when we launch them into the market. But some of the ones we've done so far, whether it be the Calvados or a cognac finish, the double oak, we've got a couple barrel picks. We just had a Manhattan finish that would still be on some shelves at mostly Benny's and a few of the other top independent stores in the area.
Thanks, Brett. Here's a question that I think falls more on the Scotch side because it really does affect peated Scotch whiskey. So I'll send it over to Jeremy, but Paul and Brett, feel free to chime in. Does a splash of water open up the taste, or is it an insult to the product?
Well, I mentioned earlier, and I think all the whiskey guys will agree, drink it any way you like it. The first way that I always approach a whiskey is neat. I'll give it a nose. I could probably figure out pretty quickly if it needs water. Having a sip, water does bring down the alcohol by volume. It does open up the flavors and aroma in the whiskey. Ice actually does cut some of those flavors. And I think everybody probably had a weird uncle at some point that kind of said, "That's not how you drink whiskey, kid." And it turned everybody off from this idea. Oh, geez, I guess I'm doing it wrong. There's ice, water, splash of water is actually how most whiskey nerds would enjoy a high-proof whiskey. Neat. I don't like the whiskey stones, but some people swear by them. So it's all up to you.
Totally agree with Jeremy. I actually think anything over about 80 proof or 40%, I think you get a huge bump in the taste of the flavor and the taste and the enjoyment of the whiskey. Even if it's just one little drop, it makes the whiskey better. It's not an insult at all. It makes the whiskey better. I don't understand the people's visceral reaction to putting water in whiskey. Do it. It makes the whiskey better. If you don't like it that way, then don't do it, but it makes the whiskey better.
I agree with both Jeremy and Paul, and I think the one thing I'd like to add that hopefully if you're a novice to whiskey is, we do a lot of tastings and a lot of standing in stores, and you hand someone like a half an ounce and you see them just shoot it. Just get 2 sips. Whatever you do the first time you're trying a whiskey, make sure you taste it twice, because that, as we talked about earlier, that first taste you're not going to get and appreciate it based on so many other factors. But then that second one is where you really should be able to appreciate what's in front of you. And then you can go down if I want to add water, add ice, etc. But that would be the one thing I'd like to add, and totally agree with Jeremy and Paul on the water part.
So,
Brett, thank you. Appreciate that so much. I want to mention right now, this is great. We've just had a tremendous amount of giving in the last just few minutes. We're at $4,290. So absolutely, I believe soon tonight we are going to be able to make this match. But this is the last chance as part of this event specifically to give via your texting opportunity. Again, 76278. Text the word "give" and then your donation amount to 76278. We have the special raffle for the remaining bottles. Any donation of $25 or more will enter you into that raffle. If you get $50, you get 2 entries into that raffle right now. So make sure you are bidding also on the auction items that are available. The auction will close in about 25 minutes, so keep bidding. You'll be contacted if you win a prize to coordinate item pickup. So we will contact you. But I just have to say, from me personally and on behalf of the organization, I want to thank everybody involved in this, everybody behind the scenes, specifically Paige Galassini from our offices at Camp One Step, who's really done the heavy lifting to put this all together. Sri Rao and everything that Edrington Americas have done. Thank you. And Jeremy for stepping in tonight and providing all of your expertise. Paul and Brett, thank you. Paul Kletko of Few Spirits, Brett Bauer of Sagamore Spirits, our tasters, Shane Reardon and Danny Parkins. Shane, thanks for taking over the Twitter. I want to thank Colleen McGrath for handling that as well. This is really, really nice. And I just have to say that, next year in person. Next year, I want this to be, we want our poker event to return. And just as Sri helped out with McAllen and Edrington as part of poker, I want to keep this whole community together, everybody who's here tonight, everybody who's part of this, and make this all part of a poker and whiskey event. This is a yes and kind of thing. So more and more and more. Shane, Danny, again, thank you for taking your time. And for everyone in our Camp One Step community, for everyone who has given, who is giving, who is a part of this, just really know how much we thank you deeply and how directly your contributions are going to help kids. You know, there's a reason why this organization is a top-rated organization by Charity Navigator, and it's because we make sure that the money goes to the kids. So for a wonderful evening, thank you so much for being here for Taste the Spirit. I'm Dan Bernstein. Cheers. Have a great night.